A farmer vanishes after heading to his chicken coop, leaving his wife, his land, and his life behind. For 5 years, the town moves on, no body, no answers, no justice. Then his aging dog suddenly walks nearly 20 miles and starts digging in the middle of nowhere, and what it uncovers reopens a nightmare no one was ready for. The real question is, why there? A quiet farm road, an empty pickup truck, and a loyal dog who waited 5 years before finally exposing a killer no one suspected. If you think disappearances only happen in dark cities and dangerous neighborhoods, this story will change everything. Today's case takes us to a small farming community where everyone trusted each other, shared meals, and worked the same land. When one hard-working farmer vanished after heading out for a normal day's work, the town believed what it always believes: he simply walked away. But some truths do not stay buried. 5 years later, when grief had faded and memories softened, a single animal followed a scent no human could trace, and uncovered a secret hidden beneath the very soil the missing man once cared for. And what investigators would discover next would destroy a family, expose a carefully protected lie, and reveal that the real monster had been standing beside the victim all along. Before we begin, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another real-life mystery unraveled in full detail. Because this story doesn't begin with a crime. It begins with trust. Caleb Rourke left his house at 5:40 a.m. on a cold spring morning, carrying a thermos of coffee and a folded notebook filled with planting schedules. He kissed his wife, Naomi Rourke, on the forehead and told her he would be back before sunset. Caleb owned a small, struggling farm on the edge of Alder Ridge, a tight rural town where everyone knew which truck belonged to which family. Farming wasn't just his job. It was his identity. Every acre of land held a story, and every fence post had been repaired by his own hands. That morning, he was meeting his longtime friend and business partner, Marcus Hale, to discuss expanding a chicken coop near the eastern field. The two men had worked together for years. When Caleb fell behind on payments, Marcus helped cover costs. When Marcus lost his father, Caleb kept the farm running. By noon, Naomi tried calling. No answer. By nightfall, Caleb's pickup was found parked beside the dirt road that led to the coup site. His phone lay inside the cab. His boots were gone. There were no signs of struggle. No blood. No witnesses. Only one thing refused to leave the truck. His old Shepherd mix, Rusty, sat in the passenger seat, waiting. By sunrise, Alder Ridge was no longer quiet. Volunteer trucks lined the dirt road near the eastern field, and neighbors fanned out across the farmland, calling Caleb Rourke's name into tree lines and drainage ditches. Sheriff Daniel Pike arrived just after 8, quickly realizing how little evidence there was to work with. No damaged fencing. No disturbed soil. No footprints that stood out among the deep boot marks already scattered across the property. Naomi stayed near the truck, gripping Caleb's notebook to her chest as if it were proof he still existed somewhere beyond the fields. Search dogs were brought in that afternoon. They followed a faint trail from the pickup toward the chicken coop construction site, then stopped. The scent vanished. Investigators suggested a simple explanation. Caleb might have left voluntarily. He had financial pressure. A struggling harvest. A heavy loan tied to the farm expansion project he was planning with Marcus Hale. Marcus stood beside Naomi during the first press briefing, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. He told reporters Caleb was a good man, but a tired one. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. When no body appeared and no suspect emerged, the case quietly shifted from missing to unresolved. Only Rusty never accepted the silence. Every morning, the dog walked to the eastern field and waited. Marcus Hale became the person everyone leaned on after Caleb disappeared. He helped Naomi manage paperwork, spoke to the bank on her behalf, and quietly took over responsibility for the farm's remaining contracts. In a town like Alder Ridge, loyalty mattered more than suspicion, and Marcus had built his reputation over decades. He coached the local youth baseball team. He fixed broken tractors without charging neighbors. He donated feed to families who were barely getting by. No one questioned why he suddenly spent so much time around the eastern fields. When reporters asked him how he coped with losing his best friend, Marcus lowered his voice and said grief had taught him patience. He claimed he still believed Caleb would walk back one day, dusty boots and crooked smile exactly the way he'd left. Behind closed doors, Naomi began to struggle. Bills piled up. The farm expansion deal stalled. And the partnership agreement she barely understood gave Marcus increasing authority over decisions she no longer had the strength to fight. Sheriff Pike reviewed Marcus's statement twice during the early investigation. It never changed. He and Caleb had argued that morning over funding the chicken coup, but the disagreement, Marcus said, had ended peacefully. Just business. Just pressure. Just men trying to survive a difficult season. And that was enough for everyone to move on. Everyone. Except the dog who kept returning to the same place. 5 years passed without answers. Alder Ridge learned how to live around the absence Caleb Rourke left behind. His name slowly disappeared from conversations, replaced by new harvests, new families, and new worries. The missing person flyers faded from the grocery store bulletin board until the corners curled and fell away. Naomi eventually sold most of the farm. The eastern field, the land tied to the unfinished chicken coup, was leased to Marcus Hale under a long-term agreement. It was the only section she refused to visit. Not because she believed something terrible had happened there, but because it was the last place Caleb had ever planned to be. Rusty grew old. His fur thinned. His steps slowed. But his habits never changed. Every few weeks, he slipped through the open gate and disappeared for hours, wandering the same dirt roads and tree lines that search teams had covered years earlier. Neighbors laughed gently and said the dog was chasing ghosts. Until one afternoon, Rusty didn't come back. By nightfall, Naomi began to worry. By morning, the entire town would. Because nearly 20 miles away, in a wooded stretch of unused land beyond the far edge of Marcus's leased property, a tired old dog had finally stopped walking. And for the first time in 5 years, he started digging. No one saw Rusty leave Alder Ridge that morning. A nearby traffic camera later captured a thin, slow-moving dog trotting along the shoulder of the state road just after dawn. For nearly 20 miles, Rusty followed a path no human could explain, crossing drainage culverts, slipping through broken fences, and weaving through patches of forest that hadn't been searched in years. He moved with purpose. At the edge of a neglected woodland lot, where old survey markers still stuck out of the ground like crooked teeth, Rusty stopped. The soil there was darker, softer, untouched by farming equipment. Neighbors searching for him found the dog late that evening, lying beside a shallow pit. His paws were raw. His chest heaved with exhaustion. But beside him, half buried in the loose dirt, was something pale and unmistakably human. A forearm. The discovery shattered the quiet Alder Ridge had protected for half a decade. Police sealed off the area before sunrise. Forensic teams carefully uncovered a shallow grave only a few feet deep. The remains were wrapped in a torn tarp, weighed down with scrap metal and fence wire. Rusty refused to leave the site. He lay down beside the exposed soil and watched every movement, as if guarding what he had finally returned to. And when investigators traced the land records, they found one detail that made the room go silent. The burial site sat just beyond the eastern field, on land controlled by Marcus Hale. Dental records confirmed the truth Naomi had avoided for 5 years. The remains belonged to Caleb Rourke. The sheriff's office quietly reopened the investigation, but this time there was no missing person. There was a homicide victim. The medical examiner documented blunt force trauma to the skull and a fractured jaw, consistent with a sudden, violent strike. Caleb had not walked away. He had been silenced. Detectives reconstructed the final known movements from that morning. Caleb's phone data showed him traveling only one place after leaving home, the chicken coop site near the eastern field. No outgoing messages. No signs he had planned to meet anyone else. Just Marcus. Investigators searched Marcus Hale's leased land under a new warrant. At first, they found nothing more than rusted equipment and discarded building materials. But closer inspection revealed tire impressions preserved beneath compacted soil near the edge of the property line. The pattern matched the tread on Marcus's utility truck. More troubling still, ground-penetrating scans showed soil disturbance extending from the coop construction area toward the wooded lot where Rusty had uncovered the body. Not a single long burial. A relocation. Someone had moved Caleb's remains. And they had done it carefully enough to keep the secret buried for half a decade. Only one person had both access and reason to move a body without attracting attention. The friend who had stayed. What finally cracked the case open wasn't the soil. It was the paperwork. A financial investigator uncovered a private contract Caleb had signed just weeks before his disappearance. It outlined a restructuring of the farm expansion project, transferring partial ownership of the eastern field and future livestock profits to Marcus Hale. But there was a second, unsigned amendment. It reversed the entire deal. The document showed Caleb had discovered inflated construction costs and unauthorized withdrawals connected to Marcus's personal business account. The revised agreement stripped Marcus of control and returned the land to Caleb, effective the very morning Caleb vanished. The chicken coop wasn't just a project. It was the center of a quiet financial betrayal. When detectives confronted Marcus about the documents, he claimed Caleb had misunderstood the expenses. He insisted the amendment was never finalized. But surveillance footage from a rural supply store told a different story. 2 hours before Caleb disappeared, the men were seen arguing near the checkout counter. The footage had no audio, but their body language said enough. Caleb shoved a folder into Marcus's chest. Marcus stepped back, visibly furious. The timing mattered. Because if Caleb delivered the amended contract before heading to the eastern field, Marcus would have known exactly what he stood to lose. Not just money. Control. Reputation. And the only investment he had left. His best friend. For the first time in 5 years, investigators treated the chicken coop site as an active crime scene. The half-built structure still stood crooked against the wind, its wire fencing sagging and rusted. Newer materials had been added over the years, slowly sealing away the past beneath fresh layers of dirt and gravel. Under the foundation line, forensic technicians uncovered a darkened patch of soil that didn't match the surrounding ground. Luminol revealed faint traces of blood. Not enough to be visible to the eye. Enough to tell a story. A violent one. A few feet away, buried beneath loose gravel, officers located a warped metal pipe, heavy, narrow, and stained at one end. The shape aligned with the fractures found on Caleb's skull. The blow had likely been sudden. Unexpected. Close. Detectives mapped the site and compared it to the relocation path identified in the soil scans. The body had first been buried beneath the coop floor. Only later, after construction continued and pressure increased on the land, had someone moved the remains to the wooded lot beyond the property line. It explained the vanished scent trail from the original search. The dogs hadn't lost Caleb. They had reached his grave. It had simply been filled in before anyone knew to look beneath the structure. And the person who continued building on top of it had erased the crime with every shovel of dirt. Until Rusty finally uncovered what construction could not hide forever. Marcus Hale did not ask for a lawyer when detectives brought him in. He looked tired. Older than his years. For the first hour, he repeated the same story he had told 5 years earlier, that Caleb had left the site angry and alive. That their argument had been loud, but not dangerous. That he had stayed behind to finish laying gravel. Then investigators placed the pipe on the interview table. They showed him the blood evidence. They showed him the amended contract. And finally, they showed him a still image from the traffic camera. Rusty, walking alone down the highway at dawn. Marcus's hands began to shake. He whispered that the fight had never been about money. It had been about exposure. Caleb had threatened to turn over the bank records and supplier invoices that proved Marcus had been skimming funds from the expansion project for more than a year. When Marcus realized the deal was dead, and his reputation was about to collapse, panic took over. He said Caleb laughed when he tried to explain. That laugh, Marcus claimed, broke something inside him. He picked up the pipe without thinking. He struck once. Then again. When Caleb stopped moving, Marcus said he sat beside him for nearly an hour, waiting for the shock to fade. It never did. So he buried his best friend, and spent the next 5 years pretending he was still looking for him. Marcus Hale was arrested the same night he confessed. He later pled guilty to second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and financial fraud connected to the farm expansion project. For Alder Ridge, the trial was less about legal closure and more about emotional survival. The man who had helped organize search parties, comforted a grieving widow, and stood in front of cameras pleading for answers had been standing on top of the truth the entire time. Naomi Rourke did not attend the sentencing. Instead, she returned to the Eastern field once. Not to forgive, not to forget, but to take back the part of her life that had been stolen along with her husband. Rusty did not live to see the verdict. He passed quietly just weeks after the remains were identified. But in the end, it was not technology, witnesses, or even investigators who solved this case. It was loyalty, a 20-mile walk, and a bond that refused to let a man disappear into the ground without a name. If this story moved you, disturbed you, or made you question how well we really know the people beside us, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who follows true crime stories. Your support helps keep these stories alive. And sometimes, it helps make sure the forgotten are finally found.